who's been a fantastic resource for us, her and her whole team with Sands Anderson. So we know there were some legal questions around authority and role of the school board, so she has some materials prepared. But we'll kind of go through, start off there and then work with you guys from that point. So I have no legal advice to offer, so I'll turn it over to Nikki.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. Nice to meet you all in person. I've talked to some of you on the phone or heard your names, so I'm happy to be here. I'll just tell you a little bit about myself so you know where I'm coming from. I have been at Sands Anderson since 2011 and representing school board since that time. We've been fortunate to be representing New Kent County School Board since that time, and my colleague Brad King represented New Kent before I joined him in 2011. One of the things that we offer at our firm is newly elected officials training. We have a larger government group at Sands. We have about, oh man, I should have counted. We're the largest practice group at our firm, and we have 81 lawyers. So I believe our government group in total is about 30. And we represent localities across the state, and then our education group alone is 15 attorneys. We do special ed, we do general counsel work, general board governance work, policy revisions, student discipline hearing, I mean, everything, essentially. And we do offer sort of an overview of many different things, but we have a section of that newly elected officials training that we do every election year. We'll be offering it again in December. Part of that training is specifically about school board authority and the role of the school board. So that's where these materials came from. I didn't prepare this for today. Specifically, we have these in the can and give it all the time. So I don't intend to go through it slide by slide. I'm happy to answer specific questions. I'm happy to start sort of at the beginning, but please note my role as your attorney, I have no agenda. I have no politics. That's not my job. I believe our job and our group's job is to give you legal advice that lowers your risk of litigation, lowers your risk of exposure to any sort of claim. And so that's where I give legal advice from. Of course, you all are free to take it or leave it. And that's your prerogative as a board with any issue in front of you. But I would give the same opinion no matter who is chair, no matter who is in the majority on any given board. And so I just want you all to know that from the outset.
Thank you.
But of course, you know, starting on slide 2, you start with your constitutional authority that the supervision of schools in each school division is vested in the school board. And then you have statutory authority that, again, I'm not intending to go over this, but I think it's helpful to think about. People don't often consider school boards corporate bodies, but they are. And what that means is you can only act through duly authorized agents. So for you, that's your CEO, the superintendent. And you.
So that
Sure.
is a big topic.
Please call me Nikki.
I'm sorry.
No worries.
That is a big topic for us.
Right.
And so can you dive into that a little bit? So I think we need some clarity as a board, all collectively and individually, as to what the authority is for a board member to do a certain thing, whether that's request information, visit a classroom, or some other task that we think we should be doing because the code says the school board shall, right? But you just said something very, very important, which is we can only do that essentially through our proxies. So if you can just expand on that a little bit and maybe answer any questions from the board members to help with that concept.
Sure. So as a board, that is the legal entity. And so at any given time, the will of the board is what 3 of you want to do. So no individual member has any specific authority unless the rest of the board has given it to you. So for example, just with the chair, you elected a chair, chairs have certain duties under your policy, set agenda, run the meetings, etc. If you all had, and I know you don't, and that's part of your meeting tonight, if you had protocols in place, they would, I can give you certain examples from other school divisions. It would say you act through your chair or your vice chair, meaning the chair is the one who communicates with superintendent and staff, or the chair is the one who has the authority to contact legal counsel to ask questions that the rest of the board has communicated to the chair that that's the question they want asked, or something like that. But of course, you have specific statutory authority to hire the superintendent and fire the superintendent. And so he is sort of the funnel through which all of your work flows. And once you adopt or establish protocols, it may be that certain chairs of subcommittee or chairs of your committees are able to contact the superintendent about various issues. It's all what you all want it to be, but essentially the only direct hire that you have is the superintendent. The other the second largest duty I would say that you have is to adopt policy. And whether it's this school board, this iteration of the school board, or all the school boards that came before you, that is how you govern. And so it is always my advice to follow those policies. And I can give you example upon example of when school boards have deviated from policy to assist a constituent or an employee. It doesn't go well, because if one or the other of you is not happy, there's nothing to fall back on. There's nothing to point to that said, I followed XYZ policy in doing what I did. And again, you always have to come back to the statute 22.1-71. Individual members have no organization or duties except such as may be assigned to them by the school board as a whole. So you bring something up in board business or member comments. I want to look into this, or I would like to attend this. Do I have the consent of the rest of the board to do X, Y, or Z? That is always the best position to be in, the most defensible position to be in, when the board is aware of the action and has given you the authority to engage in whatever it is. Sorry to be speaking in such broad terms,
No,
but I'm not,
that's,
I don't have any specific examples to
So I have a
discuss.
specific question related to that.
Sure.
So everything that we wish to do has to be brought before the board, and together all of us have to come to a decision on the action steps for that. So in other words, we need to clarify together as a board, we need to come up with those norms and protocols so that every time something happens, because we only meet once a month,
Right.
and we're not allowed to discuss things more than two people, otherwise it constitutes a meeting.
Correct.
So that can really hinder the actions of the board members.
How do we obtain that authorization if we can't do it until an open board meeting? Because if we email the chair saying, I would like to do this, then does he have to email everyone separately so that we're not conducting business, so that we're not conducting business?
Right, yeah. I mean,
And not being
it's
transparent?
possible that you could obtain authority from the rest of the board. It's dependent on what action it is. If you need to take official action based on a particular policy to engage in whatever it is that you're seeking consent for, then you would have to wait till a meeting, or you could call a special meeting. But
I think it goes back to responsibilities also, realizing that we're not the day-to-day, we don't run the operation, we're not administration, we're not employees, we're a board. And I can't imagine any time that something would be so pressing or need to be done so quickly that it couldn't be done through a board meeting, rather than trying to circumvent the system or figure out a way to make it work to fit. that's why and as we move forward, that it's important to have the norms and protocols and stick to those so that we all know what the expectations are. And I think the disconnect may not be how to get permission. I think the disconnect might be, what is our true responsibility? I trust the superintendent and the staff with day-to-day operation. That's their thing. That's not my thing. And anything outside of that, we can talk about, if we call a work session or if it's in one of the meetings. And I think we have learned and started to do more of that at the meetings, open conversations, than what we've seen displayed prior to our being here and when we started out. We're learning that now, how to move through that, so. I don't know that it's,
Can I try to just box that in, and everybody can chime in here, box it into maybe a specific example? So I think each one of us could tell you multiple stories about when we were first elected and somebody reached out to us individually, right? Whether it was a parent, a constituent, whatever it was. And, you know, we responded or didn't respond or included everybody in the response, but nobody was really sure, you know, those first couple of months, like, what are we supposed to do with this, right? And so trying to do the best job we could do, we would respond or come up with some canned answer, not really answering, right? Because we don't represent the board, and anything that I do without their permission is not representative of the board, right? I don't speak for the board unless I have the board's permission. But we all did that in the very beginning with, you know, in earnest, right? Trying to do the best job we could do. So, you know, and we've had that happen very recently where somebody's emailing school board members and presenting an issue or asking a question. So when that happens, what's the best advice on how school board members should handle something like that?
I think probably from the outset, you should say, I'll take your concern or this issue to the board, or I will talk with the superintendent about, you know, maybe what's going on, he can brief me, we may need to take additional action or not.
Right.
Because I think the other thing is more often than not, it's a student discipline matter, or it's a specific student matter, I should say, or a personnel matter that people are likely reaching out to you about. Maybe I'm wrong, but those are typically what I see. And if you gain information from those conversations before it is ripe for a decision in front of you under your current policies, you might have a due process problem because you have either prejudged the case or you have implicitly expressed a bias or impartiality to the individual who is trying to give you information. And I think it's just repetition. You have to continuously give that response. I'll hear you, you know, until a certain point and be like, you know, I'm gonna have to talk to the superintendent and see where we are on this matter or not. I appreciate you coming to me. I'll pass along your concern to the superintendent. I think the other thing to keep in mind, and this is a public document, so I'm comfortable speaking about it, and I may not have the language correct, but in most superintendent's contracts, you have agreed as a school board when you signed off on that contract to bring all of those complaints and concerns to him. So that might be somewhere to start in terms of confirming, and that might be something you can rely on.
Did we sign that contract?
I'm
Have
sorry?
we signed that
A
contract?
previous board.
Prior board,
A school
prior
board
board.
did.
This board did not.
And I think that that's the disconnect also, because
The
we
board
were,
is the board,
But-
despite whose members are on it.
Right. That is illegal. I mean, it doesn't matter who signed it. That
so
is
that's
the legal
important,
document. Yeah.
because one of my struggles is if a constituent, regardless of who it is in my district, comes to me with an issue personally, or, you know, sends me an email, and I go through the, you really, have you gone through the chain of,
Right,
you know,
chain of command.
and they say to me, well, I really would rather not, because out of fear, whether it's legitimate, you know, whether it's perceived or legitimate, out of retaliation for myself or my student. Then I say, well, then I really can't do anything unless you do that. And so I kind of, I encourage them again to seek those channels. Do I still have to share that information with the superintendent, even though they've asked me not to, please not to? Under confidentiality, and by the way, I'm not speaking for the board necessarily, but even when I tell them, it would be better if you went through the proper channels and made your concerns aware, and they say, well, I really don't want to do that. I want you to be aware of the situation, but I'm afraid of retaliation towards myself or my student.
Right,
Then I feel conflicted, and that's why I need clarification from you, because
yeah,
there's a confidentiality between what that person in my district, it's not even someone in a different district, who, by the way, I represent my district. I was elected by my district to serve on the board. If they're saying to me, Ms. King, I just want to make you aware of the situation, but I'd rather you not share this information because I fear retaliation. So,
yeah, I think
do
you
I have to say, I'm sorry, I cannot keep this? So before we even have a conversation or I respond, should I say, I cannot, this is not a confidential conversation?
Well, I would recommend that you not allow that it feels as though that person may not understand what you can and cannot do
Right.
for them. And so I think educating that individual on that further and just say, there is no duty of confidentiality
Okay.
between you and a constituent.
Thank you
That
for
doesn't
clarifying
exist.
that. That was the main
Yeah.
question that I had.
And so you just,
Without trying to be too terse, right?
Right.
'Cause I've had-
Right, of
I've
course.
had it, no, which
oh
is-
yeah, but I leave that to you
Well,
all.
I haven't
I'm not
I
good
haven't
at
said what
that.
I'm gonna say yet.
Ask my kids.
So,
Very terse.
and I've had this similar situation to me,
Yeah.
happen to me, and I brought it before Dr. Nichols, and I didn't like what he said, right?
Right.
But at the end of the day, even if you're a constituent in my district, I can't do anything for you.
It's true.
That's just the way it is. The
Okay.
board has to do it.
Okay,
Correct.
I can't do anything for you one-on-one.
Absolutely.
well, that's a good point of clarification,
Right.
because I was not,
Accept, represent their view
Right.
at a
Like,
board.
bring their, yeah,
Bring that
bring
issue
to
that
the board.
issue
Bring
to
it to
the
the-
superintendent
and
or
I
the
often
board.
say, well, you have an opportunity for public comment or
Right,
whatever.
of
and-
course.
Ms. Cunha, I run into that quite a bit myself. And I do the same thing about chain of command, and, because I can't hold my principal or anybody accountable unless it's kind of gone through that piece. But the other piece I say, in holding your confidence, it limits what I can do, the actions I can do.
Absolutely.
It's very hard to make something actionable that is also confidential. It really hampers
Yeah.
any sort of investigation. So I kind of lay those pieces out with them too. And sometimes they'll go, okay, I really want action on this, and then we work together to make that happen, so.
Thank you,
But,
yeah.
yeah,
This is one of the things I speak most often to my constituents about. When I have one-on-ones with them, is they want something to happen, and I have to explain the role, how a board is set up, and what my specific role is. And we constantly will have to educate people about that.
And maybe it's a disclaimer you sort of
Yeah.
state at the beginning of every conversation.
I think that's the best, probably in a kind way.
kind
but
way.
Say, just so
Right.
you're aware, this
Yeah.
is cannot be a confidential conversation, whether it's an email or a phone call. Thank you.
Just listing a couple others, and maybe it'll spur additional questions. Again, your bylaws and regulations, how you do business, that's obviously up to you all. And then, of course, your policy making is entirely the board's prerogative. There's a section that goes through certain duties, 22.1-79. But again, every statement is school board, school board, school board, and that is obviously intentional. That is the legal entity. You set the calendar, et cetera, et cetera. Committees, meetings, management of funds. I was gonna hop basically to student discipline. The matters that we go in front of boards for most often involve student discipline matters.
We don't have those here.
Oh, I was like, it's on page.
Yeah, and take care of all that.
Right, but Short-term suspensions, I presume the superintendent has final authority on. School boards can hear short-term suspensions under statute, however, I think that would, might imagine that is a terrible idea in terms of frequency that people would be in front of you for short-term suspensions. So the majority, if not all, school divisions allow or provide in policy that the superintendent or designee's review of that discipline is the final authority. But you would see appeals of long-term suspensions and you definitely see expulsions. But again, hopefully, at least with student discipline matters, it's easier to explain to parents, if it's, especially in an expulsion situation, that you really can't hear any facts or details outside of that hearing room. And I'm frequently educating school boards that what they hear in that hearing room is the only basis for the decision that they're going to make. They hear from administrators about the infraction, and then they hear the student side of the story and whatever evidence they want you all to consider. But any questions that you're asking need to be in the presence of both parties. And when everyone leaves, it should be the school board in that room deliberating on its own. And then personnel, of course, in a grievance situation, you have the same issue. You are prohibited from considering, discussing, or acting upon a recommendation for dismissal once it is made by the superintendent and during a 10-day period where that individual has the opportunity to appeal that decision or grieve that decision. And until you have the hearing and make a final decision, you should not be speaking to each other or considering or gathering facts on your own or anything like that.
And board members, that always puts me in an awkward position because, try to inform the board, keep you up to date, but for your protection and protection of policy and code, with a dismissal and an appeal of a dismissal, which we very rare, you have to kind of see it, hear it cold and do the review of that piece. You can't have my interpretation for 3 weeks and then get to hear it and be able to make an impartial decision. So that's one of the most awkward things that I kind of deal with when we do have to do it. Especially as a superintendent, lets you know when a snowflake falls, that, when I have to withhold information, it's tough.
But I don't have any other specific comments to make. I'm happy to answer any of your questions that you might have, but we did include several court cases at the end that may or may not be helpful.
As far as, I have a question.
Please.
Mr. Chair. As far as evaluation of superintendent, it says that the superintendent should be evaluated annually. And our policy has a little bit more specific, at least the policy that's currently in the policy manual has a little more detail, but not very much. And I was curious, is there a specific date that the school division has to submit the superintendent evaluation to the state?
No, it's just annually. And it's also prescribed in his contract. So there's a specific section on evaluation. Sometimes it lays out exactly when it takes place, sometimes it doesn't. It's not a requirement, there's no timing requirement, except that it happened annually.
Maybe we could discuss that when we talk about norms and protocols.
Sure.
Yep. Some superintendents and boards do it in October because SOL results are in and accreditation, and some do it in June. But it's just whatever marker the board chooses, it's just by that point.
Being the board that didn't hire Dr. Nichols, we haven't seen the contract. That's something we should review and understand so that we know that.
If the board does that, we can
Yeah,
send that to you in the morning.
it's a public document,
Yeah.
And we are the board that hired the superintendent.
just not the individuals on the board.
These are the ones that you sent me.
Either way, we haven't seen the contract.
one of the questions that came to me from a fellow board member, and maybe a couple more, I wanna address so that they have some clarity and answers on those things. So, one of the requirements of the 22-179, it says that one of our responsibilities or duties as a school board, right, is to secure by visitation or otherwise as full information as possible about the conduct of the public schools in the school division, et cetera. So, and one of the questions that arises from this is what authority or duty does a school board member have to visit a classroom, right? And what is the best way to make that happen when a school board member wants to do that?
Right, well, I think you have a policy on visitation by school board members at school.
That's what I think the only thing we have is what you just
We
read.
don't really
Oh, this
have
was a
set
question,
The-
but,
there's a statute that he was just quoting, 22.1-79. But it's up to the board how many times you think that's appropriate, or who you go through, or how you decide who's going to do that, because you might,
I
Imagine
think
if-
you're right, though. I do think we have an existing policy that says that we're
Let's
supposed to go
do-
through a chain of command and arrange that visitation.
I think
But-
that's true.
But just for clarification, if I wanted to go sit on an algebra, I have no authority to do that unless the board authorizes me to do it. Is that right?
That is typically how it would happen unless you have a board policy that states otherwise.
Got it.
But can I just clarify, you're saying that is typically how it's done? Is that because of tradition? Or is there something specific in the Code of Virginia or anywhere that is how it has to be done?
There's nothing specific about how it has to be done, but there's also this legal principle called the Dillon's Rule, and we operate under the Dillon's Rule, and you only have any local government, school board only has the power to do the things that are specifically delegated to them by the state legislature. So I think it would be an interpretation of 22.1-79, secure by visitation or otherwise, as full information as possible about the conduct of the public schools in the school division, and take care that they are conducted according to law with the utmost efficiency.
Yeah.
It would be up to the school board to, under that provision, to determine for itself what that looks like.
Okay, that's good to know. Thank you.
But at the same time, we don't run afoul of 22-171.
Correct, I mean, that's the
Right.
school board, this is the school board secures by visitation.
Right.
So it's still the school board's decision
Right.
as a whole.
Policy, BBA basically restates that in our policy manual. So,
Which one?
BBA, it doesn't say anything different, Ms.
About
Cooney, than the
frequency?
code, it
Okay.
reiterates the,
Yeah.
I was doing a quick policy search
Yeah,
to see if we had anything
BBA.
more.
So to put all that in plain English, the school board has responsibility to supervise the classroom, but an individual member does not, unless that responsibility has been delegated to them.
I don't think the school board has the responsibility to supervise the classroom.
So,
In
okay,
any,
so
in
here's,
any
I
situation.
have BBA in front of me, I don't know if anybody else has it.
I do.
I'm sorry, I said that wrong. The school board have, in terms of the law that Keith just read, the school board has that authority. The individual members do not. Unless
Unless
they
the
have been
authority is
delegated.
delegated or assigned to them by
Exactly.
the school board itself.
They can't just take it upon themselves to exercise that authority. The school board has to say, please exercise that
Or
authority
the
on our
school
behalf.
board has to adopt a policy
I was
that
gonna say,
says
unless we
members.
adopt a policy that says you can come and
Yes,
go as you
but
please.
that's still a
Right.
delegation.
It's still a delegation.
What about your visitor policy?
I would say, Ms. Cooney, may I do
Sure.
visitor policy? 'Cause,
Yeah.
You and I were saying, so, KK is school visitors, and says periodically board members may visit schools within the division. The purpose of these visits is to assist in fulfilling their responsibilities and increasing understanding of actual educational practices. School board members follow the same procedures applicable to all other visitors when visiting a school. So that's KK
That's
under
policy
school visitor
KK.
policy.
When was
So-
that last reviewed or established? It says it on the bottom.
Let me zoom. 221.
2021.
2021, yes,
Okay,
ma'am. February of 21.
policy. KK.
Does any board member have any other point of clarification or legal question that Nikki can help resolve?
I do, I have one. Does the federal district's court's ruling on the Biden administration's expansion of Title IX give the New Kent School Board full autonomy over gender identity issues? Although it seems we are not required to adopt federal mandates, are we still subject to any state mandates requiring our school division to adopt controversial changes? I know
I
it's
don't
kind of in
think-
flux right
Well, that
now.
was a long question, but I've answered this question several times over the last few weeks. The court case in Kentucky vacated the 2024 Title IX regs. That's all it did. The Kentucky court has no authority over the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, which is where the Gavin Grimm case was decided. And that case was decided actually in 2020, not pursuant to any regulations, but the statute itself. So I think that's an important distinction. It also was decided pursuant to the 14th Amendment, the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the United States Constitution. So it was under different circumstances. So I don't believe that the Kentucky court, number one, has any authority to upset or disturb a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeal ruling. Second, we have the Virginia Human Rights Act in this state, which prohibits discrimination against, based on gender identity. That's still the law in the state of Virginia. And that, again, that Kentucky ruling was just looking at the authority of the United States Department of Education to promulgate those specific amendments to the Title IX regulations. And that's what was vacated. The model policies that the Department of Education in Virginia under Governor Youngkin, that those were promulgated through a process of notice and public comment. Those are still in place. They have not been rescinded in any way. So I believe you're still subject to those model policies, 22.1-23.3 and the Virginia Human Rights Act.
I just wanted clarification on that.
Okay. And the Attorney General's, you might remember the Attorney General had an opinion about the model policies in fall of 2023. And that Attorney General's opinion has not been rescinded, and they would do that if they believed that some other precedential case had been decided that would that would change their opinion.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
Nope, good.
Ms. Dombrowski, not to put you on the hot seat, but you had sent me a couple other questions. Do you feel like you have answers that you need, or you want to ask a couple more questions?
No.
Well, I'm going to ask one for you, because this is something that we've addressed and gone back and forth with a couple of times, and I think it's good to hear from Nikki on it and then maybe get a little bit of discussion. So, wording of motion to go into closed session specifically for personnel matters, and what part, if any of that, would be required to be held in open versus closed? Again, is it up to the board? Is it up to the policy and the way we decide we want to do things? Is the wording of the motion that we've edited it since we've been on the board, but is that enough, or does it need to be more specific?
So the statute itself, 2.2-3712 requires three different things to be part of that motion. You have to have the purpose of going into closed session, you have to have the subject matter that you're going to be discussing in closed session, and then you have to cite to the exemption. So a mistake that I see all the time, whether it's student matters or legal matters or personnel matters, is we're going into closed session under 2.2-3712, whatever section it is within that, for a legal matter. That's not enough. You have
Too broad.
You didn't put the purpose. You're going to discuss a legal matter about what? Are you talking about a contract issue? Are you talking about, property issue? Are you talking about, whatever it is, you have to be more specific. And with personnel specifically, while you don't need to name the position or the individual that you're going in to discuss, you do need to name the fact that you are going in to discuss the assignment or the discipline of a specific certificated employee or a specific classified staff employee, so that everyone is aware of what the subject is and the purpose is to discuss the discipline of, or the assignment of, or the resignation of, or that it is
So,
clear what the purpose is.
Have you had
for
a
the
chance to
motion.
look at our current motion?
I have not.
Okay, so,
Folder. It's
I'm
on,
sorry?
if you look in your yellow folder, it's right there on the inside.
all right, well, there we go.
Okay.
Share that with you?
Slide it over.
So I think now as it stands, we say the purpose, we reference the code section, but then maybe we're a little bit too general when we say hiring, firing, and resignations. Does it need to be more specific? I think it's the one on the bottom.
Right here.
I can't-
That looks fine to me.
Yes, that is the, to include this is the
Appointments
updated
and
one.
separations of specific identifiable employees. I would put the number even,
Okay,
4,
Okay,
5, whatever it is,
okay.
numbered
number of employees.
specifically for appointments, like 6.
5 appointments, 6
separations, 2,
resignations,
or
Sure,
3
total
fire.
number. Okay.
Either way, I probably
Yeah,
more
Ms. Anderson
specific.
breaks that down for us anyway, so all we'd simply do is put the number into the motion, just like you have it.
That's easy.
You always have it broken out.
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You guys have any other questions or things you wanna ask about that?
Yeah, so in regards to, if we're going into closed session, and I get it, it's just easier to do them all at once, but when we're talking about hirees, and we have to approve, let's say, 5 people that have been hired, isn't that public knowledge? Like, why does that have to be in closed session?
Doesn't have to be in closed session, but
Okay,
if you are going to be discussing a particular, more than just saying, this is the superintendent's recommendation for hire, I think that might not be a discussion you wanna have in public, but
gotcha.
you're not required to go into closed session ever. That is just the authorized purposes for which you're allowed to go into closed session.
Well, in the code, there are specific things mentioned as to.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but
if
But
those
it's
are going to
author-
be discussed,
But
they
it's
have to be.
it's authorized. I mean, you wouldn't wanna discuss litigation pending against
Right.
the school board in open session.
Right,
There are
Or
lots of
specific
student
employee
matters,
or-
obviously would not be appropriate for public session.
Anybody else, any other questions about how we're currently doing things or suggestions on, or questions about maybe changes you wanna make on how we're doing things?
well, I'm hoping we could have that discussion when we go over norms and protocols, but as far as just basic legal questions,
Well, I think I agree with you, but I think in a minute, we're gonna take a recess and Nikki's going to leave us. So if you have any legal questions,
right,
I wanna address those while she's here if we can.
I have none. I have none.
I feel like it just bothers me, and it's nobody's fault, but just the way the policies are written, where it constantly specifies the school board shall do this, the school board shall do that. It would be helpful if it was more, and I know you can't do this, but if it was more specific, the school board has oversight over this, because as a citizen, before I ran, reading the policies, it just felt like, well, it says they're supposed to do it, but they're telling me they're not supposed to do it. So it just feels like there's not the clarification that should be there. And I think that leaves for people to feel like disgruntled or upset when it feels like, but I'm reading and it says the school board shall do this. And then we have to explain, well, the school board is not just the 5 of us, right? It's the whole, it's the general offices, it's the superintendent, it's, and I read that being the way my mind works, I'm like, oh, we're supposed to be doing all these things. And then we're supposed to be providing the oversight to it. It
And
just
delegation.
leaves me, what's that?
And delegation.
And delegation.
So when the school board does something, delegating that job to somebody else does not mean we're no longer responsible. It means we're still doing it. We've just delegated it. And if our delegee has misused the power, we're still responsible for that. And, yeah, a citizen can come and say, you're doing a lousy job, because that guy is doing his job wrong. He's right, we are. And
That's the way my mind works.
okay.
No, I hear you.
Mr. Bresky, may I give it, I'm the first one I'm saying, because we've had this discussion too. So, under career and technical education, it said the new school board provides career and technical education programs incorporated into kindergarten through 12th grade. So, technically, Ross really leads that for us, but it
Right.
does come to, and actually, that's a good example, because in February, it's Career and Technical Education Month, and we're bringing you an overview of those kind of pieces. And if we, like when we added the Navy program that's under Career and Technical Education, you know, we brought that to the board for course approval. So it is, but to your point, it says you're doing, well, the board as a collective.
Right. Or
That,
the blank school board notifies parents and eligible students.
That's a better example than the one I gave.
right,
know?
that's the legal entity.
Right.
You're the legal entity, and it is awkward, because there are certain times when, you know, we're responding to special education complaints, or due process hearing complaints, or lawsuits, and we're using the board's name in all the responses. The board did X, the board did, and you specifically didn't do it, but you're the entity that can be sued. You're the entity that can sue, and purchase property and manage property, but you're not the ones literally outside saying who can come in or come out, you know?
Right.
It's, I hear what you're saying, but, I think it's consistently the legal entity that's the actor in all of these policies, because they're your policies.
Would it make sense to help with this issue if we, and I'm just brainstorming here, if we added a footnote or something to our overall policies that explains that, you know, when it reads, the school board shall maintain accurate records, the school board shall notify parents, and so on, that what it really means is the school board shall cause that to happen, or the school board ensures that that happens through administration and staff, et cetera.
I would have to give that some thought. I'm not sure I'm a huge fan of that, but,
Okay.
I would have to give that some thought.
It basically goes back to your corporate matrix of who's accountable, who's responsible, and all that. We could do a matrix, you know? But I don't think it should be, you know, a footnote. Matrix might be valuable, because you can then trace the lines of accountability and responsibility.
A matrix or a flow chart.
Well, typically it's done as, I'm out of the corporate world long enough to get the gist of it. There's a term of art that encapsulates it, and it can be both a matrix and a flow chart. But you're basically, an organization that works as a body divides up their roles along the lines of accountability, responsibility, someone who takes action, and someone who supervises. Is it a RACI matrix, is that it? No. You know what I'm talking about though, right?
I don't actually. Sorry.
Don't feel bad. Not many of us do.
Mr. Reimer often
Yeah.
has.
That just seems like a lot more work than just adding a footnote.
But it's getting to the heart of the question you're asking. Accountability and responsibility are different things.
I just don't know, maybe my concern is, I just don't know that saying that in a footnote that is the case in every instance where you see school board. And so you would have to go policy by policy. Because there are certain things where you are taking the direct action.
Right, which is why it's confusing and
Here's your RACI chart.
not specifically, in my opinion, transparent enough.
And so would your recommendation would be that us as a board review those policies?
You have
and
to
be
review
familiar?
them.
We have to, and they've been every 5 years, and I've noticed that some of them have not been reviewed. And I think that's, because we're all a new board, it's a good starting point. Big task, but,
Absolutely, yeah,
Yep.
it's your policy manual.
yeah, kind of a lot of.
To Ms. Dombrowski's point, I mean, I think there is value in this concept of the public doesn't understand, right? And so it creates issues for the board member who's trying to navigate that communication or relationship. But when it comes back to the board, it's just understanding that the inherent structure of what a board is and what a board does and how a board operates, it just is what it is. And that's how we have to operate. And we can explain that to a constituent, right, where it says the school board shall maintain accurate records. Well, actually, we do that through, admin, when and if that issue arises. So it's just, again, getting back to not being stuck on, we're not individually doing these things. Right? We're just making sure as a board that they're happening, and our policies ensure that other people are doing what they're supposed to do as a directive from us.
Well, I think that there's been an indictment on school boards overall in general and brings rise to a lot of these issues and questions and concerns, and the term transparency. Now, if we're doing it ourselves or if it's being done by proxy, it's still transparent. It's not, we're not intentionally trying to hide anything. And I think the implication is that you're trying to hide something, and that's very unfair. This sort of governance has worked well for a long time. Perhaps for some individuals, it doesn't specifically do what they want it to do. But in all is the reason we have 5 members, and we don't have to agree all the time, and we won't. But in general, there's a matter of trust we have also. We know the policy says the school board shall, which implies we have to have a certain amount of trust in the superintendent that we're responsible for hiring, and those also that work under him in administration. And if you don't have that, and you call that not being transparent, then you start to create issues and concerns that really aren't. And it becomes the business that you do, rather than forwarding the education of the kids and having a school system that serves with excellence. And I'm at a point, while we're discussing it, I'm at a point where, I did this in Williamsburg, James City County for 4 years. I've observed what's going on. The policy that's in place and the way things are written, if you trust them and you work them through our own individual board, they work and will work for this county. But it's, if there's a policy that doesn't seem transparent enough or doesn't seem like it's working, then it's incumbent upon us to have that discussion as the New Kent County School Board and change that policy or be quiet. And that's our prerogative, that's what we can do. So I would, Mr. Chair, recommend if anyone has an issue or don't like the way the policy is written that we currently have, identify it, let's discuss it, and either change it or vote to leave it. And then we can get that taken care of and move on, and not stay in this place.
I agree. I have one final question. And this was probably more of an issue when we first started because we didn't know necessarily any better, and there's a lot of frustration in us not being able to have a dialogue with each other or as a group to a certain extent to kind of figure out some things. So is there any way outside of a publicly noticed meeting that a board can get together and communicate about goals or anything like that, or is it just off the table?
3 or more of you cannot be together and discuss the transaction of public business.
Black letter,
Definitely.
yep, thank you.
And
So
that
in
makes
other
things
words, we
harder.
have to set
I
up
know.
special meetings to address those issues.
That's correct.
Like we're doing now.
Which you can. I mean,
Yes.
you could meet every day if you want to. Sorry.
No?
We'll have to take.
I'm here every day, so.
What is
You
the
don't know our
absentee
hourly rate.
policy?
I know.
I'm good with that.
And some do. I mean, I don't know how much research you do about other school boards. I mean, some people, I mean, it's like, it is a full-time job, but,
They need to get a life,
well,
Well, they're already retired.
well,
even at that.
Speak for yourself.
Yeah.
Buy a camper, see the world.
All right, I'm gonna go down the line one more time. Ms. Cunha, any final questions for Ms. Nikki?
Not specific legal questions, no.
All right, thank you. Ms. Dombrowski?
Nope.
Mr. Vaught?
No, sir.
Mr. Reimer?
No, sir.
All right, we are in recess.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Take
Appreciate
5,
it.
sir?
nice to meet you all.
Yes, sir.
5 work?
Yep.
So 6:58, we'll be back.
Concession stands open, right?
No, it should
All right, back in session. Moving on to the second item under new business, and this is the board norms, proposed board norms and protocols. So the summary in board docs outlines the existing protocols and procedures as I understand it, that they tie back to the current enforced policies, so we're not creating anything new here. There have been many repeat questions, and we kind of addressed some of the stuff with Nikki here just a little bit ago, on how and if board members can accomplish certain tasks or inquiries, more important on the how part. So the protocols as attached are gonna be voted on later tonight and added to the annual reorganization meeting every January moving forward. And obviously, those are subject to our review and revision moving forward.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir?
Some of these also are referenced in the Code of Ethics that we read, that we affirm in January as well. We might want to make note of that.
Correct. There is some overlap, right, with the code of conduct or ethics and the policies and our protocols and how we operate them, and that's where these things originate from. So you guys have had the opportunity to review the document, and I'm just gonna generally open the floor up for discussion. What I'm gonna do is go down the line, so Ms. Cunha, you're district number 2 in the hot seat next to me, so let me know what questions you may have.
Can I make a motion that we review these, item by item and then go in sequential order? And this way, if anyone has something for that specific item, whether it's the bullet or it's something on the chart, we could refer to the slide and do it that way, because I don't want to sit here on the hot seat addressing all these at once.
Okay, you don't need to make a motion, let's do it that way.
Okay.
All right, so, the cover letter is that we agree to employ the following norms in all our interactions. Anybody have a comment on number 1?
I do. I believe that instead of students' interests come first, I respectfully disagree, and I think that academic achievement comes first. And I would like the board will prioritize the academic success and overall well-being of all students in New-Kent County Public Schools, ensuring decisions are guided by their educational needs and future opportunities. I just think that it's important that we stress that academic achievement comes first.
Well, I think they're one and the same, would be my opinion, but you're expounding on what we mean when we say students' interests. Anybody else have a comment or input on that?
I think interest and achievement are two different things. And I think
I
achievement.
think it's semantics. The intention is the same.
Semantics are important. Distinction is important.
All right, so as it stands, we're gonna take number 1 under advisement, and we will look either tonight under motion or at a later date to revise the language. Number 2. Anybody have any comment?
None here.
All right, number 3.
A single board member, does that include chair or designee, will not represent the board without the board's consent?
Yes.
Okay,
Chair is still a single board member.
got it.
All right, number 4.
Again, this could be considered semantics, but we will be mindful of the different roles and responsibilities throughout the school system and maintain a focus on policy and governance. I would argue that it's focus on governance and oversight, and wouldn't policy be part of governance? Any of the policies we create are part of the governance component of what we do as a school board?
Well, I think governance and oversight are the same, just the same word, they're synonyms. And I think we can create policy and vote on things in a school board meeting that don't necessarily directly relate to policy.
You think that governance and oversight are the same thing? Can you explain that?
As the intention is here, and as we've discussed earlier this evening with Ms. Nikki and our role, yes, I do. So what would your suggestion be?
I would just write, focus on governance and oversight. Policy is part of governance.
So help me understand in your mind, and maybe it's necessary, maybe it's not, but let's get there. What is the difference between governance and oversight, and how does the addition of oversight change what this accomplishes?
I had written some notes here, I'm trying to put my thoughts together so I could explain it. Governance, to me, refers to the school board's role in setting policies, goals, and strategic direction, while oversight involves monitoring and evaluating the implementation of those policies and goals to ensure accountability and compliance.
So I think the first thing you said is the definition of policy, and the second thing you said is the definition of governance, and we have those covered. Anybody else have any comments on this subject?
I think some of the confusion may lie in the fact that a board is both a policymaker and a policy enforcer. We'd have both an executive and a legislative responsibility. And what we're really talking about is the two kinds of roles that we have as a board. And I think the original actually reached pretty well, because policy is the exercise of our, quote, legislative responsibility. It's the means in which we then execute those policies, which is our day-to-day governance. That's my understanding, and I hope that fits well with everybody else's.
All right, anybody else have a comment on 4?
I would advocate for the addition of oversight into that.
What is the reasoning behind the,
I think governance and oversight are two different things.
all right, we'll mark that one to come under advisement, number 5.
Can you expound on that? What kind do you mean by we will be aware of our different roles as individuals? That's what we're looking at.
With all due respect, I think it's kind of self-explanatory, so I'll use myself as an example. You know, as a board member, I have a role. As chair, I have a role, and I have parameters that I need to operate within under that role. So for example, I have no authority to do anything on my own as a single board member unless you guys authorize me to do so. So I have to stay, when I'm operating as a board member or as a chair, I have to stay in my lane, so to speak. As a citizen, I have a different perspective and thing that I can do, and as a parent of 3 kids in the school system, I can take different avenues of approach when I'm dealing with an issue that has to relate to my kid in a specific class, right? And I have to be mindful of, when I'm dealing with that subject, that I'm staying in my legal requirements, so to speak, as a board member versus a parent.
So it's
So that-
specifying we need to stay in our lanes.
Yes,
That
for
was my
lack of a better
question.
or more delicate expression, but yes. All right, number 6. All right, number 7.
No, I'm sorry, Elena, did you have anything? I was,
No.
what would be an example of how one might interfere with Dr. Nichols' responsibilities? I just do better with examples.
Sure. Let me say this, so I don't have an answer to every single one of these questions that you guys are asking me. I am doing the best I can with the question that you're asking me and interpreting these. Remember that these come from already existing policies. So if there is a question about policy, then that's something we take up and address when we review and revise those policies moving forward, all right? Call that a goal of 2025. Tonight, it's more about, these are the protocols and how we're gonna operate until they otherwise change, right?
Okay?
So, and I think we heard Nikki say earlier today that as a board, our only direct hire is the superintendent, and we act through the superintendent. So perhaps an example would be where we try to act in his stead, or try to make something happen that goes around him that we are not authorized to do. As a corporate body, he is our sword, if you will. He is our actor. He is the CEO of our corporation. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, anybody else on 6?
One thing I would like to emphasize, and pair it with 5, is once again, as individuals, we will not interfere with the superintendent's responsibility on a day-to-day basis. We will put, as a board, our responsibility is to work as a board, and as individuals, we will not interfere with the superintendent's responsibility. That would be my only suggestion as an addition. Because if we decided as a board to interfere, we most certainly could. Not that I can imagine a situation, actually I can't imagine a situation where we might. I just wanted to make that clarification.
And I'm, again, open floor for discussion, guys, please.
Well,
But-
here's, I appreciate what you're saying. I don't think it's applicable in this particular case. We will focus on our work as a board and not interfere with the superintendent's responsibility. Now, if you stop there, you can apply what you're saying. But when it goes to, for the school system's day-to-day operation, I think that pulls it out.
Because
And
what
makes it
I'm probably
unnecessary.
thinking about is an extraordinary case. Well, I can think of one case that might involve day-to-day operation. Although, in order to do that, we would have to have a meeting and take that back.
Thank you.
All right, number 7.
We'd have to deal with it after.
Don't have a whole lot of input on this one. This is Virginia code. Anybody?
Nope.
All right, number 8.
Oh, yeah. Pie in the sky, sweet kisses and everything, unicorns. I'm being facetious.
I was hoping.
I didn't understand.
I
the
thought it was
comment.
either that or you'd had a
All right,
strike.
does anybody have a comment that is not humorous with respect to number 8?
Not I.
All right, moving on. So just to recap this 8 line item cover letter, if you will, whatever you want to call it. 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8 are good as they stand. 1 and 4, we may suggest revision of language, perhaps later on this evening. All right. We got a long way to go, guys, so let's rock and roll. If you don't have a comment, please say no so we can move on. All right, we're on the next page. A, developing the board agenda. Does anyone have any comments or input?
Let's see.
Anybody?
Nope.
Right, so I'm gonna ask again, when you don't have a comment, please say no, so that I'm not trying to be rude to anybody, I just wanna be able to
Sorry,
move
no.
on. If you have a comment, I'm happy to hear it. If you don't, please say no.
No,
Thank you.
No.
All right, item number B.
or the second item? Okay.
No comment.
Okay, placing items on the board meeting. Board members should contact the chair with any suggested items. I feel that the board members should provide suggested agenda items prior to the chair's agenda setting meeting with the superintendent. And there should be communication of when said meeting will take place monthly and when individual agenda items should be submitted to the chair. Just because, again, that communication piece.
I agree with you, Ms. Cunha, and I thought that we had that later on this list. We can get to it, and I think you know from at least my first interaction with you guys as chair that that is my intention.
Yeah.
I'm attempting to get these things done as far in advance as possible. This one has the letters on it if you want to review that as
thank
well.
you.
All right, so the way it reads now, fellow board members, is it says, board members should contact the chair with any suggested items to be added to the agenda. Dr. Nichols, refresh my memory, but we are meeting to set the agendas the Friday morning, if our schedules allow, after the regular.
Yes, sir. So if a board meeting is on a Monday or a Tuesday, unless the schedule deviates, that Friday, so between Tuesday and Friday to set the agenda. It's our intent, because we've got to get all these reports going, to finalize that agenda on Friday, so that we can get the reports going and get you your documents posted.
So isn't it kind of tricky this week with us meeting tonight?
And tonight's
Isn't
a
it-
work session, so really, we've already done the agenda setting for the February agenda.
Okay.
So
So,
it was tricky this time, which is why I had you guys send me the emails by those other dates.
so February 3rd, next Monday, we'll meet. At the end of that week, somewhere Thursday, Friday, we'll have a chair, vice chair meeting to set the next agenda. I think we've shared kind of the forecast of, we know what business we have to conduct as an organization for the year, so we have that kind of mapped out, and have provided that for you guys, so.
So if we reach out to you, Mr. Pagano, with a request, would you notify us if it's just not gonna make it on the agenda, so we know beforehand?
Well, I would love to be able to do that, but I have to be honest, with the amount of requests that I received, plus what I'm trying to do right now is from all of your emails. You know, we have some overlap, which is great. We also have the errant item in terms of top 3 goals for 2025. Obviously now, based on this discussion, policy is coming forward, right? Along with New Kent Elementary School and maybe 1 or 2 other major goals for 2025. So as I'm looking at your emails with suggestions for agenda topics, I'm trying to make sure they fit underneath one of those 3 umbrellas. And then, you know, the errant matters, or the additional matters, I should say, not errant. You know, I'm trying to fit those in at other junctures, but my main drive for 2025 is to focus the agenda items on those goals. Right, the other one is, you know, strategic plan, obviously, launching and getting that data piece in place so we can review it quarterly and so on. My comment on B right now would be, let's leave it as it is. We can go back to that policy and review it, and if we want to revise the existing policy and put in, you know, 10 days before, 15 days before, we'll bring that before the board and vote on it. And you guys are free to contact me in advance, as early as possible, with any suggested items at any time. All right? We good with that?
I'm good with that.
Neuropathic jolt.
All right, C, public posting of the board agenda.
My only request is, when the agenda's posted, if there's anything that comes on after, like notes or whatever, if it's not already on there, if we could just be notified so that we know when we can go back in and make sure. And
So if
review that.
there's something,
Mr. Hockman? Excuse me, man.
It's good.
Good. All right. We are working on that, and my goal is to, when the agenda is posted with Ms. Davis, to have all the appropriate attachments.
Right.
If and when there's a change, you know, we're doing our best to reach out, because I want to know also.
personnel is the only one that it is almost always up to the minute, because we're hiring and doing those different pieces.
Oh, sure.
So there
Well,
may
that's
be,
not on the agenda anyway, right? I mean, we don't post,
yes, exactly.
I'm just talking like about the minutes, like
But
if they're posted afterwards, then, so I know when I can go back in to retrieve them.
We can make that.
All right, D, obtaining information about board meeting agenda items before the meeting.
Yes, I think that possibly we should require that additional, questions to the superintendent before the meeting, that require additional information should have to be set or sent to him no later than by a specific time, which would allow, ample time for the superintendent to provide that information whenever possible. Can we have some kind of a, 5 days prior to or whatever, so that there's ample time for the superintendent and his staff to gather the information for us.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. This also ties back to individual board members requesting information, right? And for what purpose, and are you authorized by the board?
Right.
As it exists, and again, Dr. Nichols, we tied these back, these came from the existing policies. I don't have the number that this one specifically relates to, we can find it, but that's something, again, that will come up in review and revision of a policy where we can add some more specific items.
Specifics.
Yep,
Yeah.
yep. Tonight, again, just the overall, and I'm happy to keep going through this with you guys so we know what policies we wanna look at. But tonight, the idea is that we're aware of and sort of have a quick go-to sheet, you know, without pulling out all the policies at every single meeting, you know, have a go-to sheet about, all right, this is what I wanna do, this is something I'm looking at, how do I do it? Right, and so you have a resource that's, you know, sort of a quick tip resource to answer those questions for you, okay? E is going into closed session. I think that's pretty self-explanatory.
We already discussed it.
Yep. All right. F is responding to staff or community complaints at board meetings. Remember, it says at board meetings.
Yeah.
Anybody have any comments? Discussion?
One thing I've been thinking of is when somebody comes and takes the time to make a comment or a complaint or bring a concern forward to the board, if they've taken the time to do that publicly, my hope is that we would respond publicly, because if people see that people are coming forward and then they're not, yes, we reach out to the individual, but that might be of interest to the public now that it's been made publicly. So can we make it a practice to at least bring up something about it, just so that people know that we haven't just,
Well, doesn't it say here, school board members may use discretion whether to respond to citizen comments at the board meeting?
well, at the board meeting while they're asking it, right? But if it's something that requires some due diligence or that we need to look into, then at the next regular meeting, could there be a time set aside where Dr. Nichols or whomever provides a follow-up to whatever that concern?
We do that, don't we?
Well, so it's a practice when we have specific questions that we can address publicly. We don't have a whole lot that comes
No, we
to us
don't.
through public comment, but, although we are in the room where we spent most of, the pandemic, you know, often we had questions coming in about some of the different, and we would go through that at the following meeting. So if we do have those pieces, we do have a structure, we could be, I believe we called it, superintendent response to citizen comments.
Yeah.
But if we have somebody that comes up and just says, I really loved, seeing Shrek in the
Oh,
spring,
sure.
and, you know, we just have to kind of sort through those pieces to
Yeah.
be able to,
That's, I don't think so
to
much
do
necessary,
that.
but
um,
there's other times that,
but we have that outlined in policy as well, so we can do that.
All right. G, responding to staff or community complaints outside of board meetings. I think we've asked and answered that with Nikki present. All right. H, communication between and among board members. I think we're all on the same page with that, I would hope.
sorry, going back, use of Let's Talk platform is encouraged. Is that where we're encouraging people who come forward to, or ask us certain questions to use the Let's Talk platform? Is that what it's saying?
I think it says that between administration, staff, and community members. School board members are no longer on Let's Talk.
No, but you could refer somebody to Let's Talk.
Sure.
Because it'll take them right, let's say they have a bus stop question and they
Yeah.
use Let's Talk, it's going right to our transportation
And then
department.
it's tracked.
Not, you, board members aren't connected to Let's Talk, but.
Right.
That's kind of our vehicle to route traffic very efficiently, and it's worked incredibly well on, the day-to-day administrative side of things. So if it's a special ed question or whatever it is, you know directory, just type it in and it'll get where it needs to go, and that person will directly respond within 24 hours. Otherwise, it elevates to the next party, which could include me. So, it's been very beneficial for us to stay on top of tasks and questions.
Yeah, and I think it's great. I just wanted to clarify that we are encouraging constituents to go and use Let's Talk.
Plus, remember, we also have the AI chat feature on there where you can just type in a question and it will answer most of them, and if it doesn't, then we put
Right.
the answer up there.
All right, H, communication between and among board members. I think we're good here. Anybody have a comment?
So it sounds like we're being encouraged to communicate with each other one-on-one in person or via individual phone calls. Does that mean we can't text each other individually?
Well, remember, this is the existing written policy, and I think we can text or email each other individually. Right,
As
it's just
long as it's
avoiding
not
the
a
group,
conversation.
more than three, correct?
Yeah.
Or three or more, is the proper way
Well,
to say it.
maybe we could,
Yeah.
maybe we could add that kind of language, but.
All right, communication between board members and staff, including requests for information, this is letter I. Anybody have any comments?
Sorry, go ahead, Elena.
Yeah, again, I think this was covered by Nikki, right?
Agree.
So what if we have a request and we need the authorization of the board, so we need to wait until we're in a board setting to make that request?
So I think most times, I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, I think most times that is gonna be the appropriate method. I think if there is an emergency situation, then perhaps the board member who's presented with that could contact the other four members one by one. And then if we decide, okay, you know, this is an emergency, we gotta take action, somebody's gonna be appointed to do that, reach out to Dr. Nichols and let the team go to work.
Okay. So this is just request for information, because sometimes I might send a suggestion to Dr. Nichols. But it's not asking for information. Well, sometimes it is.
I don't know that we have a policy that covers suggestions. And they're all welcome, but again, I think,
Would it be possible to go through the chair with recommendations or questions that, just to cut down on the traffic?
As long as there's follow-through, by the chair. I mean, sometimes things can just get dragged on and nothing gets done. So I just want us to be efficient, accountable and transparent, but efficient, but with that efficiency, the communication piece has to be worked out, because, you know, if you are interested in getting some information, let's say we're talking about scores or something, and I put that request to you, but then when we all together approve that, to ask, see, that's.
yep, and
That's
I
the
think
part.
that's where a lot of the frustration comes in, is your communication is limited. There's no way around that, that's just the law. And so it's, again, bringing that to the board, and at a meeting, then we're deciding, okay, we want that information. But I would suggest another thing, which is when any individual board member has a request for information, instead of just making it a one-off request, think about what that ties back to. What are you gonna do with the information when you get it? What policy does that relate to, and what goal are we achieving?
So
So
do you
just
want
by
us to-
asking somebody for a bunch of information that you do or don't get, we're not doing anything, we're spinning wheels in the mud.
So do you want to, again, we have to put in the policy that the protocol is gonna be from now on, that we state what code, whatever, for each, you know, and then specify the objective, so that you have more information from us, as opposed to just asking the question?
I think that's a fantastic idea, but
Okay,
again,
well,
that,
then
that's
maybe
gonna
we could-
come back to when
yeah.
we're reviewing
Policy.
and revising policy, or we institute a new policy.
I just think the more clear and specific we can be, the less confusion there'll be for everyone.
Sure. So make a note of that, I'm not gonna remember all these things.
Right?
I'm taking notes, but I need your help, so
Take notes.
make a note of that's something that we may consider revision of an existing policy, or the creation of a new policy on how a board member requests information and for the purpose,
Yes.
okay? Thank you.
And back to the point of efficiency and targeted information, I think it would help also if we think in terms of making these regularized information requests instead of one-off. Does that make sense?
Yes,
Like data at a certain frequency for student achievement.
Yes,
Is that-
exactly.
Just as an example.
Just as an example.
Okay.
yeah. All right,
Similar
Jay,
to how we're doing discipline, data, every
Exactly.
quarter. Now you don't have to request it, it'll come before you in February.
Exactly. If we think in those terms, I think that will help in terms of efficiency a lot.
well, I think moving forward, we're gonna establish a protocol with that under the strategic plan anyway, with all of those data points that we'll review on a regular and consistent basis that will address a lot of those issues. All right, Jay, assignment of committee members, pretty self-explanatory. Anybody have any comments?
Nope.
Okay, and that's
Nope,
set to
sorry.
be done by us when we get through this thing here a little bit later on tonight. Responding to media inquiries? Anybody?
Nope.
Great. L, use of social media? Anybody?
Yes, you mentioned, outline in school policies, GA and GAD, but nothing, they didn't really speak directly about social media in those policies. Was that a mistake? Here, I have it.
I'm gonna defer to Dr. Nichols.
I'm pulling right now.
Yeah, I got it.
Um,
GA is personnel policy.
Yeah, so if you read the language, it doesn't say that GA and GAD address social media. It says that the use of social media shall conform to the same rules, if you will, as outlined in GA and GAD.
GAD specifically is access to employee social media accounts. So it's just stating that
Oh,
as,
access to social media accounts.
that's GAD.
Yeah.
Um,
I know, that's why I was confused.
And then GA is the overarching.
Personnel policies, goals.
Okay. Yeah, that was a little,
Yeah, I just didn't see how GA
yeah, that was a little.
correlated with
strange
that
to
at
me.
all.
So do we need clarification on that?
Yeah, because GAD, for example, says the New Kent School Board does not require current or prospective employees to disclose a username or password. That's not what this is referring to here. If the school board, or the second paragraph, the school board employee inadvertently receives an employee's username and password to or other login information.
The policy does not prohibit the school board and its agents from viewing information about a current or prospective employee that is publicly available.
It's just-
And this is something that we work with our employees on, that anything you do on social media is public, and
Yeah,
so it's that piece. And so it's not a board members shouldn't use social media policy, it's just
right, right.
reflecting that board members are subject to, what other employees are related to social media.
Sure.
Would be my interpretation, but
Yeah.
once again,
That's fine.
not an
And
attorney.
it
Problem with
is,
that.
Ms. Cunha, quite possible that needs some clarification or rewording.
I think that needs rewording, because the policy is not directly related to that statement.
All right, M, how, when, and whom to notify about visiting school sites?
That's M.
This should have a special addendum. Wearing Jordans is automatic request for entry to the school for the next 24 hours.
Okay, the wording,
I'll make my own version.
I'm sure you'll know, I love to go into the schools, and I've been hesitant to do so, given a conversation I had with Mr. Pagano earlier this year. I don't go into the schools to look for problems or errors. I go into the schools to be a voice, or just to be a presence, to be there for the teachers, to let them know that, we have them in our best interest, just to be a support. This one felt almost like we don't trust you and we don't want you going into schools unless you run it by us first. And then it's, so how do I get, so then I have to go through the process of getting
Well,
it
authorized to go into the
sounds very
schools.
negative, it sounds very negative.
Let's address sort of the overall arching subject. This was a policy, as I understand it, in place before any of us were elected.
Where's
So-
that policy?
Where is that
So-
policy?
It's not?
No,
So it's
I
a,
couldn't find it anywhere,
Okay.
I looked.
there's not a specific policy attached to that one, Mr. Pagano,
Okay.
that I see.
I mean, we brought up to Dr. Nichols, he was like, here's your pass, just let him know that you're gonna be in the schools. I almost always make an appointment so that the teacher can notify the principal and everything's on the up and up. But even then, I think we do have the responsibility to make surprise visits.
Well, I would defer
Maybe
you
that
back
would
to the
have-
conversation we had earlier with Nikki.
Authorized by the board.
Authorized by the
Certainly,
board,
we need to
fine.
review that
Purpose of a
because-
surprise visit? Cause I don't do surprise visits, that's why I'm just asking for clarification. And you don't have to provide me clarification, I'm just,
I don't know. I just think of if they know you're coming, and I'm not trying to make anybody sound like they're trying to hide anything. It's just, if we're trying to make sure everything's being done accordingly, why can't we just walk in?
Again, I think that goes back to what we just talked about a minute ago to the other one, which is what is the purpose? What policy are we acting under? What is the overall goal? So I think if we could tie those actions back to those things, right? And then we as a board decide, okay, we want whoever it is to go sit down on these classes and get us some information, so that helps us with a subject or a topic we're dealing with on an upcoming agenda or something along those lines. And that makes a lot of sense. And if I misspoke about this being tied to an existing policy, I apologize, I thought that was the case. Maybe this is just one of the norms and how things have been done in the past, so I may have spoken too quickly. But again, it's subject to us creating a policy around it. It's subject to us reviewing and approving the language.
I think the language should be looked at. It just seems very like you're assuming that the person going into the schools is gonna be doing something nefarious or whatever, or a gotcha moment.
I don't think that's the case at all. I think it relates back to what is your role and duty under the law? You're creating legislative policy or you're governing the school system. So what does a visit to a classroom, again,
Well,
and
I
maybe it
guess
does that. but you
That
have to-
ties in with the next one also, to an extent, but yeah, we can decide as a board what would be the circumstances that would make, would be reasonable for a school board member to go
Correct,
into a school
correct.
building.
Correct. So let's talk about N then, since it's related, right? How, when, and whom to notify about volunteering in schools or at school events.
So my question is, does that include volunteering as pertains to a committee that we're part of? So for example, when I was on the New Kent Education Foundation, we'd sometimes have things that went on in the school, we had to set up for something, whatever. I'm gonna have to come to the board and get approval by everyone to be able to do that in the capacity of being on the Quinton Elementary PTO, or at the middle school, we serve lunch to the staff. I volunteered to be part of that.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from other board members, but I think no. The answer to your question is no. That's an overreach. You've already been elected and approved to be on that committee, and then as a result of being on that committee, there's certain things that you need to do or participate in to operate effectively as a committee member.
So,
I think this all goes back, once again, to our responsibility as the school board. And surprise visits, I can't imagine a surprise visit, that doesn't even, I can't get my head wrapped around how that fits for a school board member. And what the benefit is there, what is it, policy-wise or governance-wise, that would make that something that I would do. A visit to a school, when I think of a school board member going to a school, for instance, New Kent Elementary School, we're looking at doing something there, replacing it, tearing it down, doing something. That would be a visit that I could see, yeah, we're going to the school. Or if we're gonna remodel, like the middle school, the remodeling project, going in as a school board member just to kind of get your head wrapped around for conversation later. What exactly does that look like? What are we doing? But as far as employees or situations, or if a constituent calls me and says, so-and-so and so-and-so is doing this, that, and the other, I'm not gonna, as a board member, surprise visit to verify that's what's going on. I'm going to Dr. Nichols, I'm gonna say, hey,
that's right.
this is what's happening, this is what I've heard, And then that's that.
So as opposed to a surprise visit, I did a scheduled visit for investigative purposes and, for board business, when we were discussing the efficacy of the, teacher coach. And I did a scheduled visit, observed the, coaching in classroom, and that worked out just fine. I can see other cases where you might want
You
to.
did that without forwarding that first to the superintendent?
No, I'm just saying,
Then that's not a surprise visit.
I said as opposed to a surprise.
I see, as
A
opposed to.
scheduled visit, I had, I thought that worked out very well. I could see other instances of scheduled visits, where, a board member might go into a classroom and observe.
I just, my role here, and for discipline issues or anything like that, unless there is an appeal to the board for a discipline issue that they have the right to appeal to have the board hear them, I don't understand where, I don't get involved in the day-to-day discipline or, what's necessarily going on in the classroom. If there's something that's happened, a teacher calls or somebody, I'm gonna immediately go and let them know when we talk, well, I'm gonna take this to the superintendent. That's what I'm inclined to do, that's what I'm required to do as a board member, single board member. But I'm not gonna put on my Clouseau, hat, and I don't understand that rationale as a board member, as a school board member. If I'm I just don't, I'm sorry. I don't understand it.
I wanna say, I feel like what my intentions are, I don't think you're understanding where I'm coming
Okay.
from. I just like to go into the school, I'm not saying I'm gonna take, if a parent calls me with a discipline issue, just run over to the school and try to address it, that's not what. I'm just talking about, like, on the first day of school, I thought I would pop in and say hi to everybody, but it sounds like under this protocol, that's not something I should and can do going forward, unless I have a prior approval. This Friday, I think, is New Kent Elementary Otter Day. My intent was just to, well, first, I usually reach out to Dr. Day because the last time they had the opportunity to do some service afterwards, and so she assigned me to a classroom. In that event, do I need to then get authorization from the board before I reach out to Dr. Day?
I see.
I think, Mr. Borowski, that's a great distinction. And then if we do create a policy around this, then that's something we can address, right? There's a difference between
Right.
appearances at events, right, to be supportive of the school
right.
system and show up as a school board member, which is awesome,
First day of
versus
school, welcome
I'm
back.
showing up to figure out, how the algebra teacher is teaching class. Like, that's not my job. The day-to-day operations, we've agreed contractually and legally to surrender over to the people that are running the school. So I think that can be clarified when we delineate in the policy.
Good.
And I do understand now, thank you.
All right. Oh, expectations for participation in professional development. It's kind of self-explanatory. Anybody have a comment?
Yes,
Only do we have, it's another year, so we have to go do something,
Gotta
right?
go somewhere,
Yeah.
do something.
well, FOIA and COIA are both due at the end of this year, because they're due every 2 years.
Yeah, but you all did that last year.
Okay, so I did mine in December 2024. So this is
Yeah,
one
we
year,
all would have before we started in.
You're all
January.
good
Started, yeah.
until next year.
at the beginning of next year. Yeah, so what I'm saying is,
Cool.
because I did mine in December 2024, so I'm like, oh, I need to do it again in December
26.
23, I did it in December 23, so sorry.
So do you need to-
That's right. But I
Okay.
think what this is saying is generally speaking, that we will meet all of our educational requirements and training requirements, et cetera, wherever that comes from.
Yeah.
All right.
In reviewing that policy, and maybe this is something that goes back to a suggestion for the agenda, is that it says the public shall be kept informed about the school board's continuing in service educational activities. How can we do that? That's one thing I would like to address at some point.
Could you read that again?
In the third paragraph, the very last line,
Okay.
the public shall be kept informed about the school board's continuing in-service educational activities.
Mr. Brodsky, I think public comment, I mean, your board member comments at the end of every meeting that happens monthly, I think is a perfect opportunity to publicly state, that I went to Title IX training with this, and I did, as a natural part of your comments, could be an easy, board members, you do with it what you like, but I mean, that happens
That
every month.
makes sense.
And that's recorded and on YouTube and
Right.
everything, so,
Right.
just as a suggestion.
And as a point of clarification, if I have my school board, District 2, Facebook, and it's open to everyone, I could state, right, in my monthly or bi-monthly email, post that I've been to these events, and it's perfectly okay, right?
Yes.
Mr. Butt, your newsletter, which you do a nice job
newsletter,
of putting
yeah.
your trainings in as well, so.
I just, yeah, as far as the whole board, what are we doing to make that? There's also, and maybe this isn't the place for it, but some revision I would like to make on this particular policy.
Sorry, I couldn't hear you.
There's some revision I would like to make to this particular policy. It may not be the time and place to do it, so I understand.
Correct, okay, very good. I mean, obviously, just make a note, and when we pull out what policies we're gonna look at, that'd be one of them. All right, P is expectations for participation in meetings. I think that's self-explanatory. All right, moving on. Q, when and how the board evaluates the superintendent.
I would like to say, be more specific. What is the method of evaluation as the board, we have agreed upon, on what date should the evaluation be completed by? And this is because personally last school year, I was not here, or I was not able to, or given the opportunity to do Dr. Nichols' evaluation. Even though I notified Johanna and the board and Dr. Nichols that I was gonna be in Europe. I made that clear months prior to that. And in the policy, it specifically says that each member has to be a part of that evaluation. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but I would really, that's part of one of my duties and responsibilities as a school board member.
Sure.
And I tried, and then the evaluation was done while I was away, and I wasn't even notified that it was taking place. So respectfully, going forward, I think we should have, just as a suggestion, a date by which we complete those evaluations. And I wasn't worried because you were doing a great job, and so I didn't really have any serious concerns, but it's just as a matter of protocol and my responsibility as a school board member, I was not given the opportunity to participate in that evaluation.
Sure.
And, that's a problem.
Anybody else? All right, when and how the board conducts a self-evaluation. Any comments?
Yeah, there's a policy we need to review regarding school board members are supposed to do self-evaluations and share them with everybody and review them together as a board.
Annually.
And that's part of our accountability and transparency piece. And I think it's very important that we do that.
It also specifies at the very end, based on discussion of the results, the school board develops both short and long-range goals and objectives to ensure continued proficiency in its areas of excellence. to strengthen weak areas and to improve the efficiency of the board. That is something,
Okay, so it
Really needs
sounds
to
to me, with respect to that one, that that's something that we need to forecast and put on a calendar every year for our board and for future boards, so that it's known, it's done, it's accomplished,
exactly.
right?
So,
For tonight, the protocol that's before us is that we will evaluate ourselves annually, et cetera, how the language reads there.
But yeah,
So
how
we
it
don't,
went
does
is
anybody
not-
take issue with this protocol as it's outlined?
so, is there a policy that this is tied to? Or is this,
Mr. Reimer, I'm sorry.
is there a policy or a legal provision that this is tied to?
It is.
Yes,
That's why I was just, I was
there it
It's-
is.
using a shortcut and asking Ms. Nabrowski which one it was.
AFA.
Sorry. Slide four.
AFA, Evaluation of School Board Operational Procedure.
And when we do pull that out, if we pull that out, we should also, I think, make it very clear as to specific objectives and questions for evaluation.
I agree,
I have seen this policy become a popularity contest on other boards.
yeah.
And it creates a year-long worth of rehashing that over and over. So,
I agree. The code AFA is the evaluation of school board members, and evaluation of superintendent is CBG. So if we're gonna review those policies, just for your notes,
Well, I think moving forward, we want to incorporate these policy numbers and references into this protocol.
absolutely.
CBG? Did I hear?
Evaluation superintendent is CBG.
Thank you. I got the other
You
one.
got the other
Yep.
one?
All right, S, when and how the school board monitors and updates the school board strategic plan. Obviously, that is something we are working to put in place. Again, that is currently on tonight's agenda, although it is getting late. But what it says is we will monitor and evaluate the strategic plan quarterly. With respect to it, I don't think we have any data built into it yet, but that is the next piece as I understand it. And I'm excited to have that data in the strategic plan and have it on a regularly scheduled meeting every quarter at least, where we're reviewing the data points that help us answer a lot of the other questions I think we've had over the last year in terms of, scoring and testing and reading and so on and so forth. So, everybody okay with that one?
Sure.
Perfect. T, use of email.
Excuse me.
Similar to the section on social media. Any comments?
Point of clarification, in regards to the email that we all received today, I responded immediately, and now I'm wondering if I'm in trouble for doing that.
Well, I don't know that you're in
and I was
trouble.
right
You
behind
didn't have
you.
norms and protocols, Mr. Nebraska.
I was
You
right
can't be in
behind
trouble.
you, so we're both in.
Yeah.
I hate not being responsive to people. It drives me crazy because I hate when people don't respond to me. And that was something that I'm passionate about. I don't feel like I spoke on behalf of the board, but, going forward, do I just have to say, sorry, you have to wait until I talk to other board?
Well,
What?
no,
I tell you,
Go ahead.
this is something that, if, or should I say, in 4 years, when you get FOIA'd, it's very important what you say and what you don't say. It doesn't mean you don't respond. Most of the time when I respond, I acknowledge I received the email, appreciate the fact that they sent it, and will check on whatever the situation is. For instance, that one happened to be a bill,
Yeah,
and that's.
which I already knew about.
Yeah, which is pretty much it. And there have been some responses that, when you get into the weeds, or when you say, for instance, there's an assumption of guilt with certain words that you use.
Words
And
matter.
as much as you hate that, I know, it's true. And it can come back. So you do you.
I have two comments. Number one is I think that based on the discussion tonight and earlier on last year, I had sort of drafted, and I think I might have shared it with one or two of you guys, but canned is not the right word, but sort of an outline response. that I think we can revisit and all edit
Cause I
and
hate
use.
receiving those. I'm like, you really don't care.
Well, it's not that you don't care, it's that you have legal responsibilities, right? The other thing I would say is if you are individually responding to someone, and we've all done it, you're not acting on behalf of the board, you do not represent the board, and so now I have a question. If you cross the line and that person takes legal action against you, do you have defensive counsel of this board? You absolutely do not, because you are not authorized to act as a member of, on behalf of the board. So I think if you cross a line, not that anybody's trying to do that, you're acting outside of the scope, that then all the privileges and immunities and legal representation and policy people that we have behind us are no longer behind you at that point. So it's water to be careful treading in.
Good point.
I also think, Mr. Pagano, a lot of this is you guys looking at traffic flow, just as an analogy. So if all 5 of you get an email, and are all 5 of you gonna respond individually? And if
Right.
one doesn't because they believe the chair or somebody else, then, we've had people come and go, and you were the only one that responded. Well, it's because you act as a, so I mean, I think it's just for everybody to be on the same page with the
Yeah.
traffic flow, so nobody's left.
That's another thing, like,
Yeah.
well, okay, 4 people have already responded, I don't really feel like I need to respond.
Right.
But,
Yeah, I mean,
So
that's,
that's
We don't have a
okay,
PR
right?
department, unfortunately.
yeah, we don't have a.
yeah, a lot of these are just about the flow and who does what when, so that we stay as an efficient system. Because I've received that as well, and it's like,
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. All right, compliance with the Virginia Freedom of Information Act. Any input? Comments, discussion? Great, moving on. V, norms and protocols. The idea would be to obviously put this in place, clean it up as we've discussed moving forward, and then review and approve it every January along with the code of conduct and the other things that we do in January at the reorganization meetings. Anybody have any comments?
no,
Great, thank you. All right, and I think that's the end of the protocol list. Now there's a violation list.
One quick question, there's an omission. How are violations determined?
Well, I think that it comes from you did not operate under one of the established protocols.
Who determines that? How is that determined? Is that a vote of the board?
I think it would have to be.
Okay, let's make that explicit, please.
I mean, I think you're right, we can spell it out, but it also at the same time goes without saying. No one board member
Well-
can say the other board member did something wrong.
I just wanted to make sure it did go
Yeah,
without
right.
saying,
Yep.
or it went with saying.
Hey, saying is good.
Thank you. And I would assume that would be in closed session as well.
Yeah.
And I think those,
I don't make the rules.
well,
I need you guys
we
to
do
make
make the
comments,
Well,
but
that's
we
fine.
do
no,
make-
individually, everybody keeps looking at me like I got all the answers, but
no, but again, are these standard violation, or did someone come up with this? Because now we have to approve this, it's on the thing, whether we approve this or not, and if that's written there, well, that could be problematic.
Yeah, is that anywhere in policy, or where did those come from?
violations vary. I've read a lot of boards, so most boards have protocols and, so, I mean, it really is for you guys to determine what.
did this come from an existing norm as it is? Or policy that we already have in
No,
place?
sir, there is no policy that governs, that I have seen in my review,
So
so.
how did where did these 3 come from then, or these 4 violation statements? Where did you get those from?
These are suggestions for the norms and protocols that were put on there that Ron, I, and Dr. Nichols came up with,
Oh, okay,
trying
I
to
would just-
glean, from the things that we have and the operations of the board in the past, again, establishing the protocols, and that's why it's before you. I think there's a little bit of a slippery slope here.
yeah,
Yes.
there is, especially number 3.
Well, forget about that for a second. If the 5 of us are supposed to vote on whether one board member violated a protocol and then is subject to a violation, Does the alleged violating member participate in that closed session and that vote? Like, there's so much more going on here that
Well,
we
why wouldn't
probably,
they?
we probably need to revisit this.
Why wouldn't they? How could you decide without the
I
board
totally
member
agree,
there?
that's,
Talking about the vote,
To vote whether it's a violation or not?
correct?
Ah,
and that's one of the reasons I brought up this subject.
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
whole question of violations, what, you know, how do we administer that?
yeah.
I think that has, like you said, it's a slippery slope there.
Well, we'll have to discuss it and come up with policy.
Yep.
We're perhaps gonna be pioneering this part of, but it's worth
Right.
discussing anyway, at some point.
So I'm,
The other thing to consider is this is not just something we would be establishing for ourselves, but also future boards,
exactly,
right? So if the five of us are not reelected, this is something that's in place for a future board to start off with, this is how we do things. Right, and then obviously they can vote and change how they do it moving forward.
Right.
So it's not just us, right, keeping in more of a macro view of it.
True, but it affects us now in the immediate sense, the next 3 years.
Only if we vote and put it in place.
Right.
Would it be similar to the code of conduct in that we would sign off on it?
Right. Like,
Well,
why-
ultimately, over this entire document, yes, I think that's the intention, right? Which is the norms and protocols are agreed to every year. Obviously, throughout the year, we can revise and bring those before ourselves and say, hey, this doesn't work, let's change that. But it's, again, to establish and answer a lot of the questions that everybody's had for the last year, which is, how do I do this? Can I do this? What's the right way to do this? The answer now is go to your sheet and check, this is what we've agreed, and this is how we're doing things. I mean, that's what we're trying to accomplish, right? Nobody's trying to put anybody in the box, it's just, when I get that email from somebody, what do I do? Because we all have that same question.
Well, and I think your point that for the next board or the board after that, they don't have to do this.
Right.
We're helping. We're moving. This is part of a legacy that we'll leave.
Well, I mean, I think legacy is important, but that's not why we're here. We're not here to set legal legacy. We're here to function effectively and do our job
Okay, let me
now.
rephrase that. We're blazing a trail to
Violations.
help them, the board that will follow.
Yes,
Is that
of
okay?
course. Yeah,
Thank you.
absolutely, absolutely.
All right. Anybody have any questions or comments, or any more questions or comments regarding this norms and protocols document?
thank you, Keith.
Thank you.
Yes,
so
thank
much.
you.
It was very helpful.
Anybody? All right. I'm taking another 2-minute recess, because I gotta stand up. Whole business, first item under whole business is school board committees and external boards review. This is a continuation of the conversation from the January 13th board meeting. If you will look at the monitor, please, that will help us move forward.
Mr.
Dr.
Pagano, if I may?
Nichols. Yes, please.
So we have, Mr. Vaught just some of the conversation got a little muddled at the last board meeting, so we just want to take 2 seconds and make sure we have who's who. Bridging Communities, Mr. Vaught, I still have you on that. Want to make sure that was still
Yes.
accurate. Yes, sir? Chesapeake Bay Governor's School, they meet quarterly. And their meetings are on Thursdays, typically at 6 PM. They alternate between in-person and Zoom.
And how often are those?
Quarterly,
I'm
similar.
sorry, you probably just said
I
that.
did.
I'm sorry.
That's
most
okay.
of it's Zoom.
No worries.
They only have
I just
one
wanna make
meeting
sure
typically
that
a
it
year.
doesn't
Because it's 3 campuses and it spreads all the way to Fredericksburg and so forth, that they're often by Zoom and they have at least one meeting annually in person.
So, okay. Do
So
you need
Miss-
someone to fill that?
Mr.
Yes.
Vaught was on the, he was asking
Right.
if somebody,
I should be able to fill that as long as it doesn't conflict with another, the school renovations one is,
we will not be, I'll make sure we're not on Thursday nights, Ms. Cunha, if that helps.
Well, and again,
Okay.
you can always reach out.
yeah, right, cause if
When
we
conflicts
reach
happen.
out, hey, can you fill in for me that time? I could be on that, Chesapeake Bay Governors, no, sorry, which one are we doing?
Chesapeake Bay Government School.
Okay, I could
That's
be
a
on that.
Zoom. That's a Zoom meeting.
A Zoom, yeah.
Usually.
Yeah, once a year, they get together and vote on officers, which just happened last Thursday.
So I'm expressing, I can do that, if anyone else wants to chime in, or,
I think
yours.
that
I
is
got it?
yours.
Okay, thank you.
School Health Advisory Board, I thought we had Ms. Cunha, but.
It is.
It is, okay.
It
So-
is me,
All right,
yes.
make sure we have that. We did add, Mr. Pagano and Ms. Cunha to school renovations. Ms. Morkheim is working on getting that first meeting scheduled, with the entire renovation committee, so.
Great.
That's coming soon. New Kent Elementary School PTO, Mr. Reimer, you were on that PTO?
Yes.
Are you,
Yes.
so Mr. Reimer stays on New Kent Elementary PTO. New Kent Middle School PTO
Yes.
is, I'm hearing Mr. Reimer. Anybody
Sounds like an
trying to take
option.
that from Mr. Reimer? All right,
We
going
have,
once,
we have Greg, we have.
done. New Kent High School PTO, Mr. Brodsky, okay, is there. And Mr. Brodsky, you see, we added SEAC as an official one to be voted on, so. Okay, that completes all of the, I've filled in all the blanks. Unless somebody wants to switch off of something that they were on. This does come before you for a vote tonight, and we will get everything.
Board members, are we all set? Any questions?
Yeah, is that every Thursday, Helena?
Which
No,
one?
sir.
New Kent Education?
That is,
No, it's once a month.
and it's actually Tuesdays, Mr. Vaught, not Thursdays,
Tuesday, they changed, yeah.
but we can get you the.
Yeah, if you
actual
could,
schedule. Yes,
I would
sir,
appreciate it.
we'll be happy to.
Oh,
Ross
here
is-
it says Thursdays, that's right.
Yeah. Ross is the executive director of New Kent Education Foundation by night, so we'll get you all coordinated.
All right, we good?
Sir?
All right, moving on. Next item under old business is the strategic plan update. Dr. Nichols.
Yes, sir. So board members, at a board meeting a month or so ago, actually, in last year, I brought to you the updated draft strategic plan that came out of committee. I haven't had any feedback on it from that point, so I'm bringing it back to you today in work session. In order for us to get this on a quarterly schedule and get the data points related to it, we do need board approval at some point in time. So this is the latest document post-committee, but it has not changed since the last time I brought it to you because we haven't received any additional feedback. So,
So this is essentially the second reading.
yes, sir, in a degree, it's not labeled as a second read, but yeah, this is the second time you've seen this specific document, so.
Well, I'm gonna start and say that, the last time I read it, especially if nothing's changed, that this document, in my opinion, is fantastic. It does what I think we need it to do. A lot of work, comments, meetings, suggestions went into this, which I think a lot of people in this room were a part of. I would like to see it move forward and have data put into it so that we can start using it sooner rather than later. And then, of course, when we have that data and this is a living, breathing document and we're using it, then we can figure out if there's a piece that needs to be revised or amended or so on. But I would like to see it move forward and have data put in it the next time I look at it. Ms. Cunha, any comments?
The vision statement to me, there are a lot of E's being floated.
Yes, ma'am.
There's just a lot of E's, engage, empower, elevate, then we have the other 3 E's. I think it's confusing, and I think that we need to rethink that one. I don't have an alternative for it at the moment. I don't think that's, but I just think that there are just too many E's floating around, and it's confusing. As far as.
Confusing who?
Well, enroll, enlist, employ, and then we've got engage, empower, elevate. I just think it's.
It's simple, it's easy to remember.
It's
Anyway.
effusive and
That's my opinion, I'm just offering my opinion, I'm not speaking for the board. And going forward, I agree with Mr. Pagano, but I just think that going forward, we need a little bit more accountability piece as far as measurement and who's accountable for that specific piece of it. I know
What
we said
section
we're
in
gonna
particular, if I may? Where are you?
Are you speaking generally? Are you speaking generally?
Generally speaking, the piece, I just don't see any accountability.
Well, I'm asking where in particular do you not see accountability? What do we need to change? Just in general, that could be like the E's.
There are performance indicators on every one of these, so
Are you,
perhaps,
are you saying, Ms. Cunha, that you'd like a name beside it?
Like who's gonna be in charge of that piece of it and giving the, maybe the quarterly report or whatever, who's gonna be, is it gonna be on you, the whole thing?
Yeah,
Or are you gonna,
so it has been, I have a great team that I work with,
right,
but
for example,
ultimately I
maybe
present
Mr. Ross will be in charge of some piece of this, or if.
He absolutely will
there-
be.
I don't think it's necessary to list everybody on there, it's coming from the same source. Now, he's delegating to gather that, and he gets all the information, he presents it. I think we're creating trouble down the road if something happens, or somebody can't do it, somebody can't make it.
Let's see. Ms. Cunha, what if it's not by strategy, but by goal? See what I'm saying? So goal number 2 is all Allison Anderson's wheelhouse. I can say human resources is point on that. The first one is really, goal 1 is really Ross. I wouldn't say Ross, I would say his department.
Right.
Goal 3 is organization effectiveness. So I can do it by goal.
Okay,
And name a kind of a department, not necessarily a person.
there you go.
Especially, I love the team, I hope they work here forever, but, folks change.
That's
But the
true.
departments will kind of stay steady. As that's a fairly. I only got to goal 3, but it seemed pretty easy on mine. Yeah, go for it, yeah.
Mr. Brodsky, any inputs or comments?
Nope, I'm just sad Elena doesn't like my 3 E's.
Mr. Vaught?
Sorry, Heather.
Yeah, I don't,
I'm a big girl.
I appreciate, the willingness to put goals or departments or whatever. I don't, quite frankly, I don't see the need or the point. The bottom line for us is the information. And that's I believe, as a board, that's what we're after.
Anything else, sir?
I think we just like.
All right, Mr. Reimer?
endorsed.
Okay, anybody else have any
What did you
additional
say?
comments regarding the strategic plan?
Mr. Chair, how would you, just for purposes of getting stuff done, how would you like to see this, or board members, so how would you like to see this move forward so it can be adopted and then we move into the next piece? I didn't hear major revision.
Does it need to go back before the committee for any reason?
Without any substantial changes, we absolutely bring it back and talk about kind of the articulation of it and next steps, but
Did we,
this is what left committee. The edits and revisions were the last meeting we had, so those have been taken into account in this piece, so, it's really for board discretion. If we need to put it on the next week's agenda, we can, if we need to put it on whatever, so you guys can take action. Right now, we're just in a holding pattern.
Mr. Chair, I would like to make a motion that we approve it as is. Make it an action item. Amend the action, items and approve it as is tonight.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Davis, full board. Before we do that, discussion. Mr. Vaught, I'm in favor of your motion, but I would like to amend that motion and vote that we do that, add it to the action items tonight, but add, under the goals, the department names. So, I make that motion. Does anybody
There's a
second that motion?
I second the amendment.
So the first motion, we are, Mr. Vaught, would you consider withdrawing the first motion?
I do.
Okay.
So if you can state the motion
I'm
that
gonna
is.
do my best.
Okay.
There is a motion before the board to add to this evening's action items the approval of the strategic plan as presented to us with a revision which, under the goals section, will add the department responsible for the goal. Ms. Davis, please poll the board.
Mr. Reimer,
Aye.
Mr. Vaught,
Aye.
Ms. Dombrowski,
aye,
Ms. Cunha, Mr. Pagano.
Aye.
Department has been added to each goal.
All right, any board member have any questions, concerns, or clarifications on what we just did?
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, moving on to action items. So our first action item is consideration for approval of the board protocols. So do I hear a motion to approve the board protocols as presented?
Does that include the violations?
Well, that's, the motion is protocols as presented. So
I move that we approve the protocols presented, accepting the violations page, which we would then move to have a working group refine and amend the violations page.
I second that motion. Anybody have any discussion?
I don't know how to word the motion or what I should say, but it feels like there's a lot of things left that we were going to address for possible edits.
So, yes and no. I think a majority of the things we talked about are things that we need to address in policy revision. And then I do think that Ms. Cunha had suggestions for the first couple of items that we suggested. Specifically number one. Can you, Ms. Cunha, restate the language that you proposed for number one, please?
Sure.
Academic achievement comes first. The board will prioritize the academic success and overall well-being of all students in New Kent County Public Schools, ensuring decisions are guided by their educational needs and future opportunities.
Does anybody need that reread? All right, so I'm gonna add that revision is also part of my motion.
Okay.
That we swap the existing language in sentence number one, on page number one, for what Ms. Cunha just read.
I could share that with Johanna right now,
Yeah.
if it's easier for her, if it's okay with the rest
Once
of
we
it.
vote,
Yeah.
then we can
Yeah,
do that.
once
Okay.
we vote.
So I'm gonna restate my motion, Mr. Reimer's motion that I'm attempting to amend, I apologize. So before the board is this, Mr. Reimer's motion to approve the norms and protocols as is with the following exceptions. We are removing the entire violation section, and we will change number 1 and replace that language with the language just read on the record by Ms. Cunha.
How are we addressing the school visits?
That would be as it says it is right now, and then we need to get that policy, or a policy in place sooner rather than later, so that that we have protocol for that. There's no existing policy at the moment.
So I would feel more comfortable not having that as part of the norms and protocols at this time. Because I feel like there's a lot left undecided as to how that's going to work. Unless I tuned out and didn't hear what was being said about it as far as, you know, the specific example I brought up about attending New Kent Elementary.
Given Ms. Cunha's statement, I withdraw my motion and make a motion instead to,
Mr. Reimer, if you would, I'm gonna ask you to succeed the floor for a minute, and let's just clean our record.
yes,
Right now, anyone who's made a motion, which I believe is myself and Mr. Reimer, I'm gonna ask that that motion is withdrawn at the present moment, so we can continue with a couple more minutes of discussion, and then we're gonna have a motion
yes.
following that
sounds good.
discussion. I withdraw my motion. Mr.
I
Reimer?
withdraw my motion.
All right, so right now, there is no motion before the board. Okay. Mr. Dombrowski, item number M specifically, I'm just gonna read it into the record. How, when, and whom to notify about visiting school sites. Board members, once authorized by the board, should call or email the superintendent, giving a 24 to 48-hour notice if possible. So that is what is before us tonight as a first protocol for school visits.
Mr. Pagano, if I may,
Please.
just use your example, outer day is Friday,
Yes.
so we're like 72 plus hours out from it. I mean,
Right.
easy enough,
Right, but
not going through that process. is-
specifically, I mean,
Yeah,
going
okay.
forward, for something like that, I then have to,
Fine, well,
I mean, I may not know about it
yeah.
in time for our meeting, so then what would
Or
I
come
have
to a
to
meeting.
do?
Can I offer a possible revision
Of course you
that
can, we are in
statement?
discussion, you can offer anything you like.
Okay, school, board members, once authorized by the board, should notify the superintendent prior to visiting school sites. Keep it simple.
Say it again.
Board members, once authorized by the board, should notify the superintendent prior to visiting school sites.
And said, so you're taking out the 24 to 48 hour notice.
Yeah, it's very, and then it gives us an opportunity to visit that policy or whatever and decide, you know,
I think my main concern is getting authorization by the board
once authorized by the board.
for something like that.
I believe that we should leave policy as is, as written here until, or protocol, as written until we get a set policy in place at a later date. But we at least have something in place, howbeit just a place marker for now, until we devise policy or create policy
So
in the
what-
near future.
Okay, but what I'm saying is this Friday, I have to get your authorization to go.
So may I ask a question, are these the two remaining controversial items? When to notify about school site, how and when to notify about volunteering? Then I make a motion that we approve the policy as is, accepting the violations page and sections M and N. with the amended language that Ms. Cunha proposed on the first bullet after we agree to employ the following norms in all our interactions. Then set up a means of amending, of working out the language and policy of those two items and the violations in a separate session.
Is there a second?
Can you restate
I can't second.
what?
Oh,
I had an idea.
I second.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
I was trying to help, so,
I
but
second.
I'll stay out of it.
I will
think
say it again.
Express your idea once the motion's.
I make a motion that we approve the policy as presented with the following exceptions. We amend the language in item number 1 to what Ms. Cunha has proposed. We take out, for the time being, sections M and N, and the violations page, which we work through at a separate session.
I second that motion.
Discussion? Mr. Nichols?
Thank you.
Dr. Nichols, sorry.
And once again, board members, it's really about managing traffic. So, and if this is a great idea, Johanna gets credit, and if it's not, I'll take the heat. So Johanna already sends you guys as a board, of upcoming events. Would that
Weekly.
serve as authorized by, I'm trying to find a way that we share, like, here are all the great events.
Right,
People love that you come to our events.
right.
Yeah.
You know, would that be permissible as something like a blanket kind of thing that,
The
she,
invitation would be authorization.
she does a lot of work to put that out to you guys know about it. and
Right.
I'm trying to find a vehicle that,
Right.
just as a discussion point, and if it makes it muddier, it was my idea, but,
Yeah, if I want to go visit a school or a classroom, I don't have a problem, but if it's on the calendar and I don't know about it until, I mean, you know, you put it out the front, but sometimes,
They're all on the school calendar.
and they're on the school calendar, which,
So we don't have to get permission, right, to go to those?
Well, that's
That's what he's
what
saying.
we're,
Yeah,
and if
that's
you
what I'm saying.
amend this to say that, then you're good.
Yeah.
Except for those already posted on the school calendar. And then the rest will fall under.
I don't know that that idea provides us any clarification at all, I gotta be honest.
it's not as tight as it was in my head when I was
Yeah.
saying it.
tiny bit.
But I'm also tired, so.
Yeah, it's getting late. I think the distinction comes really with what is that any individual board member doing? So if you're appearing at an event, a sports game, whatever, you're supporting a teacher or staff, an event,
If I may, I
and I
really
think we
think,
can, hold on, Mr. Reimer.
Sure.
I think we can pull that out and say that any board member can do that. That's great, that's wonderful stuff, that's what we want to be happening. But the other side of that is if you're conducting or operating any type of on-site evaluation, investigation, school board business, whatever else there may be, academic review, curriculum, check-ins, checking out library books, you know, those are things that you need authorization from the board to do, and need to give, in my opinion, at least a little bit of advance notice to admin so they know what's going on.
Sure.
and I think it
And
needs to be tied to a policy, a
Yeah.
specific policy.
Well, correct, and so we talked about the purpose of tying our actions to purposes and goals, yes.
And that clarification would help me to not feel so, like, afraid to.
Well, I think it's more of the intent of the board as well.
To show up and support and be.
Rather
Yeah.
than say,
Right,
you gotta give 24 hours notice to go to
right,
Yeah, we don't want that,
no,
yeah.
right, that's
a
not,
play.
It was just, the way I read it, it just felt like a roadblock to being able to be in the schools.
You just have trouble communicating.
Well, I really do.
all right. Anybody have any additional discussion?
So will that be written and clarified at this point? Or
Not
are
re-
we removing it and to discuss later?
So it will not be clarified at this point. That is something that we need to do, in my opinion, ASAP, because it is a top issue for everybody.
Yep.
Right now, the motion that is before us by Mr. Reimer and seconded by Ms. Cunha is we're adopting as is, removing MN violation section and amending the language in number 1. That is the motion before us. Anybody have any additional questions or comments? Discussion?
No.
All right, Ms. Cunha, Ms. Davis, please poll the board.
Mr. Reimer.
Aye.
Mr. Vaught.
Aye.
Ms. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Ms. Cunha.
Aye.
Mr. Pagano.
Aye. Oops, sorry, fell asleep there for a second. All right, the next action item is consideration for approval of the school board committees and external boards. Do I hear a motion to approve the
So
school
moved.
board committees?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? Great, Ms. Davis, please poll the board.
Mr. Reimer.
Aye.
Mr. Vaught.
Aye.
Ms. Dombrowski.
Aye.
Ms. Cunha.
Aye.
Mr. Pagano.
Aye. Good? Great. Our last action item is the one that we added through motion, amended, we'll call it 4C. This is consideration for approval of the strategic plan with the amendment of the departments responsible for the goals 1 through 4. Do I hear a motion to approve the strategic plan with that amendment?
Motion to approve with the amendment.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? Ms. Davis, please poll the board.
Mr. Reimer.
Aye.
Mr. Vaught. Ms. Dombrowski. Ms. Cunha. Mr. Pagano.
Aye. All right, and that is all of our business for this evening. The next regular meeting of the New Kent County School Board will be on Monday, this coming Monday, February 3rd, 6 p.m. with a closed session to begin at 5:30 p.m. As it stands now, the meeting will be held at the New Kent County Historic Courthouse Boardroom. That being all, this work session is now adjourned.